Little motherfucker gonna try to rob me. Well, I'm gonna show you how we do it up here in Vegas, no. I wasn't trying to rob. Shut up! Before I bust a cap up in you. Now who sent you? No.
So what's up? We standing tall in your short stuff.
Yes.
All nuts of the bullshit that you dressed up. Address us on scholarship, homie, knowing you messed up. So fess up, you look for the best, knowing that that's us. So what's up? We standing tall in your short stuff.
Yes.
All nuts of the bullshit that you dressed up. Address us on scholarship, homie, knowing you messed up. So fess up, you look for the best, knowing that that's us. Sword clown, know that it's over like it's the fourth down. We the source now. Hear a big bang with tanks on ground. More than the scrimmage, yeah, we forcing the sinning, yeah, we pushing no limit. Leave the fight with no blemish. You the hometown, but you not receiving no privilege. We gon' do you bad, rape, rob, and pillage. But we nothing like the white man. I can see that you a big fan. Every time we go live, I see you in the damn stands. Watching and plotting, I see that you stalking a bit.
Yes.
You laughing at people, they seeing you taking
Here's the definition of plagiarism. The practice of taking someone else's work and being successful off as
Crazy ass nigga, we the source, yeah, we sight source. Spitting hot flames more hotter than hot sauce. For real? Chummy ass nigga,
Yo, Source Gang in the building. We back. We back, family. All right. Elimination Chamber. And again, folks, we narrowing down in the first round. It's all about this. Huh? Do you have the testicular fortitude? What's your manpower? It's right here. Intellectual prowess. What's your research? What's your scholarship? Right? And do you have the ability to rebuttal and substantiate your argument? Source Gang, man, where champions are made. I got the Source Debate League champion in the building. Joshua, what's good, family?
Yo, I'm looking forward to this. Rudi said he's going against the top notch. You know what I'm saying? The runner up the last tournament. He said he ain't scared. He ain't ducking his taco. Said he ain't scared, man. He ain't never scared. Bone crusher. You heard me? So this brother coming in, he ready to fight. He flared up, and we already know what the argument king gonna come with. So let's get it, man.
Rudi go burn the building, man. Listen, man, y'all gonna put some respect on James Cassel name, my brother. All right. He didn't just end up at the end of the tournament by chance. He went through by knocking debater after debater after debater, round after round, and showed himself, right, to be a top-notch debater, man. So this is about to be a good one. All right. We're moving forward in the tournament. And again, this elimination chamber. Meaning what? One loss, and you out of here. Oscar away. All right. So now, we want to introduce the judges and the illustrious panel. Right? Joshua, you want to introduce the judges?
Yes, our brother Henry. Henry will be judged tonight. Henry, just open your mic and let everybody know your ideology.
Hello, how you doing today? I am CEO, founder of Newsroom at Newsroom 16 YouTube channel. We here to observe the debate. I don't really know anybody in the debate, so no favoritism. I'm just here to grab the the knowledge. See the people who debating. I hope y'all have a wonderful presentation. Give us a show. That's what I can say. Give us a show.
All right, all right. Who's
And we
up
got
next?
Kevin G. We got Kevin G in the building. Open your mic and let everybody know who you are and what your ideology is.
Kevin G. Hold on 1 second, man. I got kids, man.
Yeah,
My
you
bad,
coming
y'all.
here trying to
So,
look all extra smooth and all that,
yeah.
man. Then you don't talk on your intro, man. What's wrong with
I'm
you,
just
brother?
out here enjoying the debate, man. But Kevin G, owner and creator of Assyiran Comic. That's out now. That's RYIRYN comic.com. Just here judging as a Trinitarian Christian to see who got the best out here.
All right.
And last but not least, we have our brother Lab that will be judging tonight. Just introduce yourself and your ideology.
First and foremost, I want to say shalom to the room. Precepticons in the building. I'm a
Yeah.
Hebrew, I'm a Hebrew Israelite, and I'm just looking forward to a good debate. Touch gloves and come out fighting.
That's right. That's right. That's right. All right, man. So without further ado, man, Joshua, you're gonna have to keep the time for us. But you want to explain the rounds and who's going first.
All right. So the rounds are 15 minutes each. So they're going to have 3 rounds at 15 minutes each and a crossfire session at the completion of the 3 rounds where each debater will get 10 minutes to interrogate each other. The topic was there a Levantine migration into West Africa around the Assyrian conquest. The affirmative is James and the negative is Rudi. May the best argument win.
All right. So who's up first?
That'd be me.
Are
Can you
y'all
put it up
ready?
on the screen? Presentation up on the screen.
One
Yep,
second, it's
I'm
coming.
loading it up. I'm loading up right now. And
Listen, man, Joshua got the best internet on social media, okay? I don't know what this guy doing over there, but every time he do something, it always works. What's still going on?
hey, man, that's all of my wife, bro. She do all that. I don't know nothing about it. You know what I mean?
All right, man. But yeah, man, the graphics I guess got lost in transport over to you, man. But yeah, this right here is the Levantine presence in Iron Age West Africa, pretty much. And all right, let's just go on here to the next slide and let's get started because this presentation here is gonna be me pretty much trying to lay down 3 things. First, it'll be that the oral traditions of the people show that there is a Levantine component to them. Secondly, is the archaeological evidence will support a Levantine component. And lastly, I'll round it out with the genetic data. So starting out, we're going to go into the oral traditions of the people and some of the scholarship from Nigeria concerning the people. Next slide, please. All right. In the next slide, it says, this is from the Histories of the People of Nigeria, Origins of the Nigerian Peoples on page 26. This is from Toyin Falola at the University of Texas from Nigeria. He says, for the most part, these stories appear in 2 forms. On the one hand, these stories deal with the origins of different people from time when the world was created. These types of stories set the origin of the human race itself within the context of the different groups. On the other hand, these stories allude to migration by groups from one or more parts of the world to either their former or present location. Next slide, please. And this is right here is just, and this slide talks about Toyin Falola, gives some of his credentials. Next slide. Next one too.
It's on the screen.
I just went over that one. So the one that say histories of the people of Nigeria. Right there. All right. Histories of the people of Nigeria. Origin of the Nigerian peoples, page 26 through 31. The more historical account, Sultan Bello of Sokoto, the Fulani, claims that the Yoruba spring from Oduduwa, the son of Ludumaru, one of the kings of Mecca. In the account of the Yoruba people of either migration from Mecca or somewhere in the Arabian Peninsula as a result of religious persecution. The peoples relapsed into idolatry and were expelled from Mecca. At the head of the team was Oduduwa, the son of Ludumurudu, who led the people fleeing Mecca. After a 90-day journey, they reached Ile-Ife and settled there. And I'm kind of just going over this one here to show just different migrations into the region. Not that this is an exact migration that happened during that time period, but just show kind of what's going on when these things happen, because all the stories are kind of congruent. At Ile-Ife, Oduduwa and his people met 13 autonomous groups, and the groups fought a prolonged battle that lasted 30 years. Unable to conquer these groups, Oduduwa and his people were eventually accepted and incorporated into Ile-Ife. It was believed that Oduduwa, due to his statesmanship and advanced military prowess, emerged as first among equals. Their willingness to compromise could also be use of weapons, military strategy, and statecraft, because pretty much he was coming from a region that was, dealt with a lot of politics, a lot of war. So when you come into a region that doesn't quite have those type of weaponry, with less people, you can do a whole lot more. The abundance of evidence exists for the Yoruba oral histories that the Aborigines fought the aggressors for about 2 generations until the time of Morimi, undoubtedly the most famous of the palace queens. According to the Ife tradition, the 13 kingdoms and states that were in existence at Ile-Ife before Oduduwa and the autonomous Igbo groups. All right, let's go on to the next slide. And again, that's right there is just to show kind of what was going on when they came into these areas and what they had to go through, fighting amongst the people. You know what? For the sake of time, I want to get to something else. Let's skip that slide too. Go back to the histories of the peoples of Nigeria. That starts with like the Yoruba peoples. Right there. Like the Yoruba peoples, the Igbo peoples have 2 different accounts of their origin. The first, mythological, claiming that the Igbo peoples descend from the heavens. The second is a history of migration from one place to their present locations. Dealing with the latter, the Niri Uguliri Umuliri tradition stone claims that God Chukwu created peoples known as Igbo. Elizabeth Isiche has noted that Niri, Uguliri, and Umuliri and a cluster of other Igbo groups in and around the modern Amambra trace their origin to Erie, sent by Chukwu. Erie landed on the infertile waters in the middle of the Amambra River Valley. He married 2 women who bore him 6 children together. This account and its variant do not mention anything of the origins of Erie's wife. Nei Ako, the first wife, had 5 children. Let's go on to the next slide because that's just detail. The Niri kingdom, which stretches from Nsukka to Akka to Olu in northern central Igbo land, is believed to have been founded around 900 AD. As Niri and his descendants journeyed from Niri Aqua area to the different places where they are found today, many of them stayed at different spots along the way to the current settlement. A few of the areas, including western and northern Igbo land and upper northwest Cross River, including the Aro Confederacy, Ohara, Akwa, and Umunoma. In addition to these areas, the Igala people, especially those in southern Igala land and part of Benin, are also believed to descend from the Niri kingdom, who may have migrated to these areas between the 12th and 15th centuries. In general, Niri Aqua areas are undoubtedly the oldest settlement in Igbo land. Now, again, this isn't when they first originally got there, but this is when they got to these current locations they're talking about where they are today. Let's go on to the next slide. This right here in the history of the Igbo origin by N. Okoye and others. We are still looking towards our historians to supply us with a valid and acceptable answer to the origin of the Igbo people. We are no longer comfortable with guesswork in quoting the Igbo slave, Eluda Equiano, and some far of bar statements may be some Igbo elders in connection with the origin of Igbo. The Igbo is an immigrant group, is no longer debatable as no ethnic group over the world can boast of not migrating from somewhere and mixing up with one or other migrant groups from elsewhere. Therefore, no matter how beautifully we might argue that the Igbo do not belong to or have some elements of migration groups in them, may not be seen as historically true. Nothing about the Igbo could be more historic than their origin, which over the years has provoked challenges and tussles amongst the historians of Igbo extraction and beyond. According to Isichi, no historical question arouses more interest than the present day than the inquiry into where do the Igbo come from. Next slide, please. There has existed an avalanche of guesswork and suggested by the Igbo historians and ethnogenicists concerning the origin of the Igbo people. All that were said about the origin of the Igbo should be summarized only in two headings: the outside origin and the aboriginal motif. We're going to focus on the outside origin here. According to Chukwuma, Mr. Innocent Okuri gave a new dimension to the history of the origin of the Igbo people. Okuri is of the view that the Igbo are the Jews who fled from Israel following the persecution of the Israelites by the Assyrians. They moved southwards from Hebron and Beersheba and arrived in Cairo in 710 BC. They, the Igbo, soon departed Egypt and journeyed on to the present inhabitant, where they were joined by other exiles of the Jewish province of Habatia, called the Afrikondilisis of present-day Ifiks. And the Igbo and Ifik arrived first in Nigeria in 638 BC after the exile of the Israelites in 710 BC. And the reason I'm doing this is because, remember, we're talking about the exile period that's between the Assyrian/Babylonian exile. That's between 700 and 500 BCE. The entire Igbo never migrated into Nigeria one day. The Igbo who arrived very early are the Eri group. After Eri, the fifth son of Gad in Genesis 46 and 16, and the Ero group after Erodi, Genesis 46 and 16, both sons of Gad. Next slide, please. The Obu Gad, the sacred temple of the mortality and brotherhood of Oguliri kingdom. And this right here is pretty much, it's going to go into the history of the shrine and everything around them. A shrine that's dedicated to Gad, who is supposed to be the son of Jacob. Israel. Next slide, please. In every empire or kingdom, there is a tradition of mystical force that wills every community together, whether it be Europe, America, Asia, or Africa. In Igbo tradition, coronation of kings is viewed as a kingly festival, especially when it comes to kingship of the Eri kingdom. In the coronation of any new king with the Eri kingdom, especially the Neri king, which takes place in Obu Gad alongside the Udu Izi, the covenant pot of clay, the coronation will not take place. The excavation of the clay of the pot of clay in the deepest depths of the confluence of the two rivers is highly surrounded with mysterious up till today. This paper examines how the Obu Gad becomes an indigenous sacred temple of mortality that binds the Igbo communities in ritual symbology of brotherhood and serves as an epicenter of global tourism site. So again, we're focusing on this temple, which is supposed to be dedicated to Gad. I'll read the next part. In the African traditional religion, sacred places are special and ordained places designated to the divine. A place like the Obu Gad in Ogulu Liri cosmology symbolizes a special place in the union of space and time within the incarnation and evolution of timeless energies, which in turn is of two folds, which represents the physical and spiritual. In traditional Igbo paradigm, Obu Gad as a sacred institution has become a symbol of place at which the living and spiritual can basically meet and unite, especially as it is to do with the institution of kingship. Primarily, Obul Gad from the time immemorial is believed to be a sacred shrine that represents a separate sacred realm that connects the Igbo to their great ancestor Eri and reunite and reconfirm their brotherly relationship and keep it for posterity from time and space. All right, let's go ahead to the next slide. Origin and migration. The origin of Oguliri people would be linked to the migration of the Igbo race to the present-day Nigeria as a nation who was among the Hebrew patriarchs from Mesopotamia to their present-day homeland in Palestine. Commenting on the history of the Israelites, again argues that it is true that the position taken above, which is one that widely held today, has been vigorously contested in recent years by certain scholars and maintain that the patriarchal narratives are more or less imaginative literary creations of much later date, and that the early monarchy and hold on, let me blow mine up on my screen because I can barely see it on yours.
2 minutes remaining. 2 minutes remaining.
All right, appreciate it. All right, I'll start right here at the part where it says Erie and his entourage continued their migration southward until they finally settled to the place known to us today as Aglu Erie's ancestral home of the Igbo around 1303 BCE at the confluence of the two rivers. Is where that's located at. Let's skip on to the next slide, please. And since I got 2 minutes, let's skip on to the Jewish Encyclopedia slide. I think that may be my last slide for this part anyway. All right. According to the 9th century Jewish traveler Eldad ben Mali, Eldad the Danite, the Igbo Bene Israel may be descendants of members of several of the lost tribes of Israel. He contended that the Jews of Africa came from the tribes of Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher, who fled the land of Israel so that they would not participate in the civil war between Judah and Israel during the time of Jeroboam's succession and reign over the northern kingdom. Eldad continued that these Jews originally settled in Havilah beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. With them, they had a copy of the Tanakh, less the books of Esther and Lamentations. These Jews had no information of the Mishnah or Babylonian Talmud, but devised their own Talmudic traditions in which all the laws were credited to Yeshua ben Nun from Moses. And this is pretty much showing that this had to be during that time period because they have no books that's after the Assyrian conquest, according to Eldad the Danite. And if I have any more time, I yield it there.
Time. You had 8 seconds. All right. All right. Elimination Chamber. First round out the way, man. First round out the way. So James established the Erie people, the Igbo traditions, the oral testimonies, archaeology, and he's printing that and making a cake.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, man. So, look, that was some powerful information in that round, Joshua, man. I'm taking notes here, right? So I'm looking at the first documentation, the Igbo history of the origins. And it gave these time references, right? 720 BC, they arrived in Cairo. That's a very interesting time frame because that's right before the separation in 720 of the northern and southern kingdom. Am I right?
Yeah, that's around that time frame there, man.
And then the source, huh?
Jeremiah, wasn't Rudy Gobert defensive player of the year?
Yeah, he was. And he gonna have to play some defense after what James just did. Let me finish here. Right? the old boy Gad, right? The sacred tablets or the sacred temple of morality and brotherhood. That was fire. And I'm looking again at some of these time frames in which alludes to certain possibilities, man. So, shout out to James Cassel, man. Excellent scholarly work, brother. And I'm very interested to see what Rudi has to say about some of these sources, man. So it's on you, Rudi. Are you ready?
Yes, I think so. Let me get one. Let me see. I lost you. Hold on. Here we go. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
We already got you up.
All right, cool. All right. All right. Is my time started?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'll get started then. Basically, I led the idea of an Assyrian or a migration of Levantine peoples into West Africa after the fall of the Assyrian Empire around the around 605, 720, to the 700s is, I think, the main academic proponent of this, and I focused on this. We can talk about the Igbo probably in the crossfire. I know a little bit about that as well. I know something about it, not an expert. But the most popular academic proponent is of the idea of a migration after the fall of the Assyrian Empire is Dr. Dirk Lang. He's a Belgian expert in African history. He's also an expert in Arabic. And he's worked in the region. He's traveled widely in the region. So we're talking about an academic. He's a Belgian, interesting figure, born 1941. So you're talking decades of scholarship. He is not lacking in expertise. But I find his interpretation somewhat there are holes in his interpretation and in his conclusions. And I'll give you a reason why I can't accept his hypothesis at this time. So we'll go over the main bullet points of Dr. Lang's theory. He said there was an exodus after the fall of Assyria in 605 before the Common Era as a founder event for certain African states. He names three of them, Kebi, the Hausa state of Dora, and also he mentions the Yoruba. He bases all this on king's lists and onomastics. Of course, these sources, the king's lists and some of the oral sources, which some of you might be familiar with, we'll be going over those, are written Arabic sources and oral traditions, and he maintains they've gotten short shrift in the wake of nationalism and independence in favor of traditions of local origin. In other words, after the independence movements of West African states, you have nationalism and you have the idea that, we're not peoples from, we're not derivative of something else. This is an idea the Europeans came up with, our colonizers, missionaries. We are very much indigenous. We developed here in West Africa. And that is, right now, that is the majority view. Dr. Lang has gone against this. He said that, the earlier sources have to be paid attention to. And there might be some, I do agree with him to some extent, but I won't get into that. Again, I'm not an expert in any of this. From Arab and African evidence, African oral tradition, it appears that the fall of the Assyrian Empire resulted in mass migrations from Syria, Palestine to various parts of sub-Saharan Africa, of which mainly to Central West Africa. This is what Dr. Lang believes, that there was an exodus. Those who participated in the exodus were various Near Eastern communities, mainly allies of the Assyrians, who were being deposed by the Babylonians. They had allied with the Egyptian allies of the Assyrians, and they retreated into Egypt and then retreated further down into Africa. Okay, in the aftermath of the Battle of Carchemish in 605 BC, Egyptian and Assyrian troops fled to Egypt, followed by the resettled pro-Assyrian deportees. A lot of the older record, I forget where Dr. Lang gets this figure from, but he said up to 1 million deportees, and of 4 million, because we know the Assyrians, there's some evidence that they moved people around. to make sure they wouldn't have, we know about the deportation of the 10 tribes of Israel and other groups. They moved people around their empire so, to keep from fomenting rebellion, to keep put the kibosh on problems. He maintains that up to 1 million deportees, which is a massive amount of people, came mainly from Syria, Palestine, but also from the Assyrian mainlands, and fled first to the west into Egypt, and then to the south to Egypt, and then further into sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, written evidence for a migration. He said it's supported by data derived from ancient Near Eastern written sources. Lang is saying that he can infer this looking at the Arabic sources, written sources, and oral histories, and say that, well, they kind of match up with ancient Near Eastern written sources. The Babylonian Chronicle, which indicates the main stages of the Assyrian downfall in the biblical book of Kings, which notes the ethnic troubles in Judah during the final years of the 7th century. Yet, written accounts mentioning that refugees from the ancient Near East reached sub-Saharan Africa are only provided by Arab historians. Lang admits this. We only have the Arabic sources, and we have the oral traditions of the Hausa, the Yoruba, specifically the Oyo, the Oyo kingdom, and which was recorded by Samuel Johnson in the late 19th century, and also the state of Kanem Bornu in what's called the Girgam. All right, the Arab historians we're going to talk about. Ibn Qutayba, the 8th century. They cite biblical. They use a lot of biblical imagery. They were Muslims. The Muslims incorporated the Hebrew Bible into, because it's derivative. It's an Abrahamic religion. That Ham left Mesopotamia with his children to the south, where he settled on the shore of the sea. Ham's descendants are said to have multiplied and then become the Nuba, the Zanj, the Fazan, and the Zagwa. Followed by Al-Yaqubi. 9th century descendants of Noah by Ham dispersed into Babylon by marching first westwards and then southwards into the Bilal al-Sudan, where they created the kingdoms of Kanem, Hausa, Kakao, Gal, and Ghana. These are just two examples of Arab historians. I'm sure some of the people on the panel are very familiar with this material, probably more so than I am. Okay, reliability. Lang believes the Arab historians should not be dismissed because of their use of biblical narratives. A lot of modern scholars will say, well, they're using biblical narratives, biblical ideas, metaphors, and these aren't reliable. These are myths, and they incorporated myths, trying to shoehorn newly contacted people perhaps into the Islamic worldview. If they were Muslim believers, for example. Christians are accused of doing the same thing, as well as Jews. But Lang says, no, we should look at the Arab historians as reliable, and the reliability of historians regarding other subjects, because they were very reliable about other things happening on the ground in those countries, doesn't render their interpretations or accounts as invalid. What Lang does, he says it's Babylon, not Baghdad. He's saying that where you have Arab accounts that these people came from Babylon or Mecca or Syria, Palestine, as you have where you have an Oyo, like for example, Odudwa is seen as coming from Mecca in Arabia. In other cases, you have rulers who are or founders who are coming from the Yemen. Lang says, this can be his corroborating evidence. First, he says in 500 BCC, before the Common Era, we have archaeological evidence of urbanization, larger settlements, etc., in the region of Chad, especially. Linguistics in Chadic Arabic, sharing roots with Assyrian and other West Semitic languages. And he said Aramaic documents, which we don't have, and I'll get to the importance of this in a minute, were poorly preserved. They were written on papyrus. He maintains because they were written on papyrus and not on tablets that they disintegrated, so we don't have them. My point is we don't have them. We don't have any of these documents. And this is where I think Lang speculates, and he goes, I think he goes a little wild in his speculation, but I'll get to that. Semitic roots. Okay, where'd we go? All right, Semitic, and this is a quote from Lang. Semitic roots for the same meaning as observable in Chadic and other Central Sudanic societies does not necessarily indicate widely differing influences. They might reflect a single wave of migration comprising different Semitic and other people, such as the resulting from the fall of the Assyrian Empire. He's saying essentially that, the languages that we have in, the Arabic language in Chad could have been influenced by other Semitic languages. He doesn't really flesh this out too well, but then again, I'm not a linguist, so I don't know, but I am a little skeptical. All right, and he said interpretatio Arabica. Basically, he's saying the Arabic influence as being mainly interpretive and not constitutive, manipulatory and fraudulent. He says the Arabic influences, the Arabic narratives and histories you have to look through it. This approach seeks to uncover a previous, more authentic form of the tradition beneath the Arabic Islamic interpretation. What Lang says is that even though we don't have access to those documents, through the oral tradition, which the Arab historians recorded, some of them were on the ground as well, in those societies, recorded the oral traditions, and based on those oral traditions, we can look through what those written sources say, that the Arab historians and chroniclers put down, and say, okay, we can look through that and we can see traces of this migration of Assyrian, refugees from the fall of the Assyrian Empire coming into West Africa. All right, and he's saying it's kind of we can infer that from looking at the Arabic sources on the King's List. All right, in spite of their widely different forms and names of their heroes, major West African traditions of origin reflect the mass migration precipitated by the fall of the Assyrian Empire by the end of the 7th century before the Common Era. That is Lang's thesis. That all these oral traditions seen through the people on the ground, the West African civilizations on the ground, can be seen through the prism of these Arab historians. We can see, by looking at the heroes and the kings and some of the stories behind them, we can see the story of the fall of the Assyrian Empire. I think that's a pretty tall order. It's difficult to substantiate. And I will go into why I think it's difficult, why I think it's problematic. What time am I? How much time do I have left?
You're at the 12-minute and 40-second marker, so about roughly 2 minutes and 20 seconds.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, he also goes on the Yemenite rulers, saying that this prism also goes not just through you have the Arab historians, and the Arab historians are also looking at Yemen. Yemenite rulers assume the role of the great Semitic rulers of the Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian empires, of whom Arab historians had received some information by Arab traditions and biblical records. And Lang says, without knowing that the subject matter was the same. He was saying the Arab historians had no knowledge of this. They didn't know it was the same thing, and it was they were making they didn't attempt to make any interpretations, but the subject matter was there. It was the same. They drew from it. And lastly, Lang maintains that an underlying substratum, and this is key, an underlying substratum of tradition supports the Arabic reports in Arabic literature links to a much older period. Hence, African traditions of migrations and founders from Yemen and other places in the Muslim world may describe much earlier migrations. So, I've established, okay, this is Lang's thesis. In other words, it's an interesting thesis. And as I said, he's not lacking in credentials. We're talking about someone who's an expert in Arabic, and through Arabic, presumably he has a little bit of grounding in older Semitic languages and traditions. You know, he's a scholar of West African civilization. But I'll go ahead and yield my time, and after which I'll go into why I think this theory has holes in it, why it's problematic.
All right, you got 30 seconds left. You want to yield?
Yeah, I'll yield my time. How do I get out of here? Do I stop sharing my screen or just push escape? And
we got you. You don't even have to do anything. Just sit there.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right.
Enjoy the show, brother.
Okay, so Joshua, so basically what I'm getting from
Rudi.
Basically what I'm getting from his presentation is that a lot of the sources have similarities based upon these people coming out of a Arab or a Arab Muslim background, and seeing that some of these sources are mostly secured in Arab sources based upon they have a lot of the they have held on, they have done a better job of holding on to their ancestral records. Would you agree with that, Joshua?
Man, I said if you don't have no Arabic sources, you don't have real this migration. That's what I got from it. He's saying, hey, these stories he's telling that are being inferred by Derek Lang is coming directly from Arabic sources, and he even read from an Arabic sources saying that these could be the children of Ham if you put the biblical tradition or narrative as a factor. So I see a lot coming from Rudi. I think y'all need to stop playing with Rudi and put some respect on his name. That's what I think y'all need to do. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm definitely interested in seeing how James Cassel is going to handle that, because listen, you can't deny those particular sources. But what it is, it's a disrespect to the oral tradition and the ancestral cultures that's coming from another race of people, and that definitely has to play a part in the realities of what's valid history, right? So I'm definitely interested in seeing this next round. James Cassel, are you ready?
James. Yeah, I'm ready. Could you get the slides back up there and put it back at the Jewish Encyclopedia point? I want to go over one more thing that was on there.
Yes, sir. I got you. To be on the stream right now. Pull up one.
All right, I'm gonna start in that second paragraph at the bottom. It says, one theory holds that ancient Hebrews and later ancient Israelis migrated west from the Arabian Peninsula through Egypt, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Sudan. No one is certain when ancient Hebrews first emerged from the Middle East and settled in West Africa. It is thought that they had begun to arrive before 202 BCE, the date associated with the arrival of ironworking civilizations, i.e. the Note culture. Now, my opponent spent a lot of time debating Derek Lang. I appreciate that he watched some of my older videos and work that I did, but I'm always about progress, brother. I'm always growing. So I'm not going to just focus on one scholar. As you see, I'm coming with a multiplicity of sources. So you're going to have to deal with more than just Derek Lang. All right. You're going to have to deal with the Jewish Encyclopedia talking about that Hebrews are thought to arrive there with ironworking civilizations like the Note culture. That's right here. That ain't Derek Lang, brother. Next slide. So we can get into some of this archaeology. God Prevails by Evangeline Ngozi Chukwu on pages 29 and 31. On pages 29 says, what Israel and others say about the Igbos. Under the direction of the Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in October 1995 and in May 1997 under Benjamin Netanyahu's Israeli government sent delegates looking for a long-lost brother Erie. They went to Nigeria, state to state, town to town, tribe to tribe, quietly observed to see if any recognizable Hebraic traits or customs would pop out. When they made it to Obul Gad, their research ended as they saw the Igbo there displayed Hebraicness in their culture. They even saw the ancient stone throne of Gad and immediately recognized the script as Paleo-Hebrew, authenticated by the King Solomon Sephardic Federation in 1997. And then on page 31, where it talks about the archaeological evidence, it also brings up again the Paleo-Hebrew script has been found in various places in Igbo territories in Nigeria. Drawings like unto the Magen David, Star of David, have been found in various places of Igbo land prior to missionary arrival in Nigeria. There is a stone throne of Obul Gad, which confirmed Paleo-Hebrew inscription at the foot of the throne that indicates that the throne was constructed in honor of Gad. There was also an oxy stone found in Igbo land with the Paleo-Hebrew word Gad on it. And it's from Igbo's Hebrew exiles from Israel. Next slide. All right. A developmental history of early West African agriculture. See, because when we talk about developments in West Africa, new people coming in, we got to actually look at the agriculture on the ground and see how it developed. Modeling the evolution of agricultural economies in Africa demands a more critical understanding of the data. One approach that has become increasingly central to the debate is ethnobotany, the use of anthropological data to characterize the broad diversity in different food production strategies. Newman notes that agricultural practices in Africa tend to cover a vast middle ground between hunting and gathering on the one hand to intense agriculture on the other. Greater awareness of traditional land use systems has led to terms cultivation and intensification gaining such support. Next slide. Unfortunately, cultivation is almost impossible to identify archaeologically, and instead we have to rely on ethnographic analogy and indirect evidence in order to infer cultivation practices. Nonetheless, it is worth considering the social impact that cultivation may have had on populations who perhaps had little need to domesticate cereals to the point of morphologically changing their size and shape. It is important to bear in mind that the lack of domestication, i.e., the production of genetic change in plant species, does not negate cultivation. That various factors may be actually countered the domestication process. High levels of mobility, for example, may necessary by increasing unpredictable environment and demographic constraints, may, as suggested below, have limited the morphological and physiological changes associated with the domestication. Instead, as suggested by Brick, the systematic exploitation and necessary preparation skills of wild cereals would have necessitated, next slide please, regional sharing and exchange of information, providing a framework for later agro-pastoral developments. Such activities would have played an essential role in what she terms pre-adaptive strategies. Nonetheless, while investigations into the pre-adaptive conditions for agriculture are clearly of importance, the context of agricultural development in West Africa is quite different to that which is found in the Nile or Eastern Sahara. The earlier mid-Holocene occupation of the Central and Western Sahara is comparatively ephemeral, leaving a little archaeological trace. I'm gonna stop right here and talk about this for a minute, because what is pretty much building the grounds for is that something happened during this time period dealing with the movements of people that changes the agricultural framework of West Africa within a certain time period around this Nile Delta, which we're about to get to. Equally, the hydrology of the Niger Delta and the dense, next slide please, forests cover the sub-Saharan Africa support low-density Holocene populations. That means before 3000 BCE, we're talking about low populations, no big population, no population boom. Archaeobotanical evidence dating to 3000 BCE is therefore extremely rare, providing little evidence of pre-existing socioeconomic strategies. Instead, the pre-existing conditions for West African food production appear to be rooted in the developmental pastoral strategies found along the Sahara-Sahel borderlands, as noted by Tarufi. Increasing mobility levels prompted by increasing aridity would have included exchanges between groups as further adaptive strategies, generating broad areas of interaction and herding territories that acted as an opposite vehicle for the spread of plant and animal domestication. So again, it's emphasizing after this 3000 BCE period, then we're starting to pick up with the agriculture in the region. All right, next slide, please. Current evidence based on charred plant remains, pottery, and pollen suggests the agricultural societies only emerged in humid regions of Africa around 1500 to 500 BCE. So that's giving us our window to work with. We know that we had Carthage up there in North Africa. Some people say as early as 1300, some as late as 1100 BCE. So we're seeing where this influence could be coming from. Some of the second millennium after agriculture first appeared in the Sahelian zone of West Africa, and possibly 7 millennia after it appeared in the northeastern Sahara. The first archaeological attested crops raised in the Central and West Africa tropics were the arid adapted pearl millet and cowpea and humid forest crop oil palm. These have a contrast history to tropical Asian crops and are commonly thought to have been spread throughout the rest of sub-Saharan Africa by Bantu-speaking peoples dispersal from present-day Cameroon. Now, that's very, very important, present-day Cameroon, because when we get on later and start looking at some of these Iron Age sites, they're going to be around that area. Researchers know very little about how farming was adapted to the humid Central African forests, even though this is crucial for understanding the peopling of the equatorial forests. It is also important for the settlement of the drier zones that exist to the south. The rainforest zones formed a substantial barrier from the Atlantic coast in the west to the East African plateau near Lake Victoria, being too damp for the ideal for the pearl mill and cowpea agriculture that developed in the Sahel. Food production populations who arguably also spread Bantu languages must have either crossed or circumnavigated the Central African forests during the expansion into Southern Africa, potentially. Moving on to the next slide. All right, right here we're going to talk about the bananas that's found in West Africa. The earliest direct archaeological evidence for the use of bananas comes from the paleoliths in Sri Lanka, layered around, let's just say 35,000 years ago, according to the secular timeline. Banana seeds of both Miska, Acuminata, and Balbisania were found in terminal Pleistocene and Holocene deposits, leading Delange to suggest that foragers had begun to alter banana biogeography by at least this time period. However, given the proximity to the site of consensus natural range of wild banana, well, I just wanted to point out that part about that. Let's see if the other key part is in here because I don't want to waste no time. Okay, yeah, let's move down to about that last sentence right here. Currently, the earliest credible example of evidence derived from sediment to the phytoliths, banana phytoliths, were dated to about 2500 to 1900 BCE in India. And then next slide, please. All right, in Africa, which is where it's important, has been reported in two early stages. Pre-AD 1000 sites, Manusa in Uganda, carbon dated to, that'll be about 2200 BCE to about 1100 AD. Oh, my bad. No, that's right. 3220 BCE is correct. My bad. 3220 BCE to 1100 AD. And when we talk about Cameroon, which is important, which is what we brought up early, the dating is 700 BCE to 315 BCE. That 700 BCE is real important because we have to explain, this emergence and this emergence of these people. Right here we have, which they were talking about different routes that which could have been taken in order to explain how these Asian crops got into West Africa. Me, I promote Route C, so that's what I'm presenting. West Asian route. Some of the earliest research on the tropics suggests Asian crops reached India before Africa and moved to Northeast Africa, spreading south along wet environments of the Nile Valley. A Nile route would mean that the Asian crops reached the Sudan early on and gradually spread into sub-Saharan Africa to the west of the Ethiopian highlands and Lake Turkana. They may have become less restricted to river inhabitants by the time they reached the White Nile of Equatorial and gradually moved into the Inner-Klunstein region of the Congo Basin. Once the tropical rainforest and monsoon climate zones, it can be envisaged that these crops once again spread along the river corridors as farming societies in the environment tend to be tied to riparian zones. A Nile-based route and has been popular because archaeobotanists have found Africa's earliest crop cultivation in the Nile Valley, and because taro and banana are important in the recent Egyptian agriculture. Although the Nile Valley is not the tropical environment, river water allows the crops to grow in this region. Next slide, please. However, there is far more relative little evidence for the Nile being the corridor of the crops, and the African descent appeared in the Egyptian remarkably late. The lack of historical, pictorial, and archaeobiographical Egyptian evidence before AD 900 of any of the crops means that the Nile dispersal is unlikely to predate the late antiquity, rules out the early introduction over 2,000 years ago. And I'll save the rest for the next round.
You got about a minute. You want to?
Okay, well, let me just go ahead and do a quick little summary. Pretty much in this part of it right here, what I showed was that there was landscape changes in the way they did agriculture and the peopling of the society. They went from a earlier farm when they were pretty much hunters and gatherings, just gathering millet, to a cultivating society, which was actually changing the genetic composition of the millet to make it more productive in order for them to raise larger societies, which later would give us the Bantu expansion. And I yield there.
All right.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Hey, Joshua, I think there was some powerful points. When you look at whole civilizations or whole groups of people starting to have certain levels of evolving and making a transition from hunter-gatherers, and then you start to look at the influx of cultivation and crop influx. That's a powerful point, Joshua, man.
Yeah, man. The agro-pastoral argument that he pretty much presented. How did these Asian crops get West Africa? That's a strong point, man. He's fighting. He's showing he's the argument king in the second round, but he still got to see Rudi, man. Rudi Gobert, DPOY. Man, y'all better put some respect on Rudi. Also respect my brother James because you know he ain't playing no games. That's good.
Let's get it, man. Rudi, are you ready? You're on mute. You're on mute, Rudi.
Mute yourself. I had to mute you because you left your mic open during this round. You hear you coughing. Unmute yourself. Click.
There we go.
There you go.
All right. Sorry about the noise. All right. Let me go back. Okay, to pick up where I left off, what I was saying is Lang, and Lang is who I'm addressing now. I'll address some of the what I know about the Igbo later on. Can't go into detail, but I'll do my best. But for example, here's my problem with Dr. Dirk Lang's interpretations and his conclusions. Now, the Arabic sources are valid, absolutely, and the oral traditions of which the Arabic sources were based on, what the Arab historians or Muslim historians wrote down, are legitimate, absolutely. It's Lang's interpretation that is, I think, a little bit wild. I think the Arabic sources saying that, and also the people in question saying that they came from further east and coming from Mecca and places like that. I favor an indigenous origin, that they were that they didn't come from that much further east. But I'll get into that. I can get into that later, perhaps. For example, here's what Lang does. We'll look at the Bayajida legend in Dawra. It's the Hausa kingdom. It's probably the traditional center of the Hausa civilization. Here's what Lang says. There were two different migrations. He's reading the Arabic sources in the King's List, and he's saying there are two different migrations. The first originating from Canaan and concerning the bulk of the people under the leadership of Queen Mother Magajia. And the second originating from Baghdad and concerning the dynastic founder of the Dragon Slayer Bayajida. He's a hero in a Hausa hero and a founder. It can be shown, according to Lang, that the distinction between the two different waves of migration corresponds to two components of the immigrant state founder sharply distinguished from each other. He's saying that's what the Arab sources say. Canaan and the second originated from Baghdad, which are both medieval locations. What Lang says is, by looking at the King's Lists and looking at similarities in the stories, he's saying the first group of people consisted of the deportees from various nations who were partly resettled by the Assyrians in Syria, Palestine, from where they had to flee after the defeat of the Assyrian-Egyptian alliance in 605 BCE. The second group consisted originally of the Assyrian troops, which were able to retreat from Nineveh after the conquest of the town by the Babylonians in 612 BCE. These troops are subsequently wiped out in the wars against the Babylonians, so that at the end, the hero, the Assyrian king, came alone with his horse to Dawra. Here he is said to have killed the dragon in the well, to have married, and that is the local tradition. Bayajida killed a dragon in a well, to have married the queen mother and to have fathered the progenitor of the 7 Bonza states with the slave maid of the queen mother, and later the progenitor of the 7 Hausa states with the queen mother herself. He's saying that the Hausa derive from an Assyrian king, that Bayajida was an Assyrian king, that he came from Assyria and he followed on the heels of this queen mother. To me, this is a bit of a stretch. He's saying that it appears that he infers from this legend that it appears that the killing of the dragon represents the Assyrian principle of legitimate rule. The marriage of the queen mother, as put in practice in the Hieros Gamos, corresponds to the ancient Near Eastern element of deification, the fathering of the founders of two different sets of states, with the queen mother and her slave maid, to the Israelite scheme of descent involving Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar on the level of the parents, and Ishmael and Isaac on the level of the offspring. Such a combination of elements from different sources, and this is quoting Lang, is an innovative way of precisely what can be expected from an immigrant community composed of various Near Eastern groups, including Israelites, Babylonians, and Assyrians. Problem with Lang is he's saying that this is based on a source that was kind of hidden somehow within the, it's part of the oral tradition. The Arabic chroniclers, took this tradition, and he's looking through this tradition and somehow extrapolating what happened in Assyria from this tradition. But he doesn't have a lot of corroborating evidence. It's a lot of speculation. Let me do this. Okay. Let me get back down here. This is just a map basically saying that timeline of events. There's a big gap in the knowledge here. He's taking essentially what's a medieval state in the 8th and 9th century and saying that they were founded much earlier. As far as the archaeological evidence goes, there is nothing to suggest that the Assyrians were in the region or Levantine people were in the region at the time. We would have found like more material evidence of this. They had reached a state of urbanization by that time, by the 6th century, but there's nothing from what I looked, maybe I'm missing something. It's possible I've overlooked things, but nothing that specifically validates a Levantine or Assyrian or any of the deported peoples or subject peoples. That nothing material that in the material culture that validates that I've seen, and of course I haven't looked at everything, that validates a migration there. Also, let's take a look at the kings list, the kings in the Kebi list, for example. That's one of the states that, and this is the onomastic argument, looking at different names. This is where onomastics can be problematic, very problematic. I'm a little skeptical when people use onomastics. This name sounds like this name, and they get this name. It's possible, it's tantalizing, but it has to be corroborated. He really doesn't bring too much corroborating evidence. Like, for example, you have the kings in the Kebi list, the ancient Near Eastern kings, and identity and chronology. You'll also see it doesn't really follow any synchronicity or chronology. He's kind of all over the place. For example, he makes, you can see the names. For example, like Sargon, probably the most well-known king, one of the most well-known kings in Assyria, the founder of Akkad. He's saying that the king that is named as Kanta in the kings in the Kebi list is one and the same. And he'll take a story from or something from the history of Akkadian civilization, and he'll liken it to something that was happening on the ground in Kebi, for example. This is problematic. This is the big problem with onomastics. You also see a lot of the onomastics don't really match up. Some of them, I'll admit, are tantalizingly similar, Burun Burun and Burun Burias, but a lot of them don't seem to, he doesn't make a very strong case for it. Here's an extension. Assyrian king list, the Bible, Greek authors, the Kebi list. Didanu is Dundun, Hanu is Fanu, Abazu is Abdu, and so on and so on. This is problematic. Lang presupposes, these are my problems with his thesis, Lang presupposes underlying Aramaic or other documents that inform the oral traditions or the accounts of Arab historian, yet he admits this. He admits we do not have it at our disposal. This is like a missing document. Now, this is done. Scholars do this. They look at other documents, like, for example, biblical sources, and they say, well, there must be another underlying document that we only have fragments of. He doesn't admit that there are fragments. He said we simply don't have the documents at the disposal, but the proof in the pudding is the oral traditions. Lang's thesis is based largely on onomastics. I mentioned the king's list that cannot be verified with any certainty. Some of the names look similar, but he seems to be all over the place with the chronology of when these kings lived. And he has, for example, he does have a skill set in Semitic languages, but he draws his conclusions from the verisimilitudes. They look similar in accounts of the fall of the Assyrian Empire that give his thesis an air of plausibility. If one didn't know any better, they would think, yeah, this seems to make a lot of, this seems like it could make a sense. There is an air of plausibility to his theory. Assyrian historical personages and names, yet there is a long gap in time and absence of archaeological and solid linguistic evidence. The archaeology doesn't say that there's any material culture there. Not that I've seen that's convincing. There might be a few things from trade, but if you have migrants from those civilizations migrating into, like, for example, the Phoenicians, you mentioned the Punics, basically the Phoenicians in the founding of Carthage, they brought that culture with them, and we have very solid evidence of Phoenician colonies all over the Mediterranean. We don't have this in West Africa. Not at the present time. I mean, there might be something found that yields up something that confirms Lang's hypothesis. As yet, I don't think it's there. While Lang is certainly not lacking credentials in West African history or Semitic languages, hypothesis suffers from a lack of strong corroborating evidence. All right. And he also admits to some speculations. Through some of the foregoing suppositions may be speculative and discarded by further research. Continued neglect of the oldest information provided by the Diwan, he's talking about Kanem Bornu, the Kanem Bornu king list specifically, would deprive the earliest history of the Sefua, that's the ruling clan there, and for that matter, the earliest state history of West Africa of some of its most valid assets. I agree with him there, but I also agree that when he admits to some speculation, whatever the difficulty in understanding them, written sources, because some of them are rather opaque, difficult to understand, even by scholars, being less amenable to divergent interpretations than oral traditions, certainly deserve highest priority in historical research, even if the disturbing message of this particular text is immigration from Syria, Palestine, which, of course, would upset a lot of people. There are a lot of people, we all know of some of the debate groups on Facebook, there are people from the Jewish community who say, absolutely not, this is not plausible. There were no Jews in West Africa, that sort of thing. I'm open to the idea. I just don't think there's enough evidence at this time. But he's saying that I agree that he's making a very strong case. He said, look, we have to look at oral traditions and we have to look at the written traditions as well. We can't just discard them because of these nationalistic impulses and saying that, everything developed in West Africa in situ and there wasn't any influence from outside. He's saying that we have to look at the Arabic resources and sources.
2 minute warning. 2 minute warning.
2 minute warning. Gotcha. And this is where I got this from, an introduction to the history of Kanem Bornu, the prologue of the Diwan. To what James said regarding, I'm going to go very quickly from what I've read about the Igbo belief system, and I only started looking into this relatively recently, a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I started to find sources. I drew from Derek of Fodderwanwa. He is a practitioner of Odinani Omanana, the Medicine Shell YouTube channel, and also his Patreon. The Igbo Conference, which is a yearly conference of Igbo historians and other intellectuals who talk about Igbo issues in Igbo land and in the diaspora. I also read Odinani, the Igbo Religion by Emmanuel Anizoba. It's available free on PDF, by the way, describing the Igbo religion, Odinani. Nothing in it suggests influence from outside sources. It's an original religion. It's also very deep. I get into that. I read the basic Igbo History and Society essays of Adiel Afigbo, who is probably the foremost historian of. He's not around anymore, but of Igbo civilization. The Embattled Gods, the Christianization of Igbo land by a church historian by Ogbo Yukalu. I also recommend that. Talks about how Igbo land became Christian. And most recently, I haven't read these, but they're on my shelf. The Children of the Holy Covenant he's also a practitioner. I didn't put his name, Ilor, Theophilus Ilor, who's Igbo academic talks about Sabbatarianism, very important.
Time.
And, okay,
Time.
gotcha.
All right.
All right, family. Can you hear me? Yeah, man. I got something to say, Joshua, man, but I'm gonna hold my I'm definitely gonna hold my comments to the end of the debate. So great
I
job.
can comment on it. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hey man, he's saying it's all speculative. You ain't got
Oh my
nothing.
God,
Speculate.
bro.
He said you
cannot
live
believe
in
you doing it.
he said you live in a pipe dream, man. Anybody can dream. The brother said Carthage, we got the evidence for them being in Carthage. Where art thou in West Africa? That's what the brother said. That's all I'm saying, man.
Where
I
art
will say,
thou?
where art thou, man? Where art thou? That was his second round. I will say this, Rudy, you're going against James, not Derek Lang, and I'm just gonna leave it at that, man.
Gotcha.
All right.
I thought James was going to come out with Derek Lang, so I started, working on Derek Lang. But
yeah. Listen, for all you debaters that are listening, man, that's very important that you deal with the opponent in front of you, because what's going to happen is you're going to miss opportunities to, assert your position, right, against your opponent. All right. So, James, are you ready?
Ready to go. Can you get it up on the screen? Shoot, where we left off.
Sir. Let me get your time ready, and then I'll bring it on the screen. All right.
Yep.
Time starts when you start.
All right. Can you blow it up full screen? There we go. All right. Spectral analysis of the distribution and chronology of food-producing sites in Central Africa gives limited insight into when and how such societies spread. Although we know a lot about early village sites in Gabon, the Republic of Congo, and Cameroon, in crucial areas in the Horn of Africa, the Congo Basin, and the Sahel to the north, fieldwork remains rare. This should not be misinterpreted as evidence for the absence of food-producing societies. Nonetheless, the data is complete enough to show that from 2,500 years before present, which is about 500 BCE, food-producing societies existed in the northern and central belt around the Central African rainforest that could have transferred Asian crops. Now, I don't know how a people can transfer Asian crops without migrating from Asia or having some contact with people who migrated from Asia. So if they're contacting people who migrated from Asia, you're going to get Asian influence. That's the whole point of the debate, to show the Asian influence or the Levantine, which is Western Asian influence. Asian crops. The northern belt could well have been a thinly populated region inhabited by predominantly pastoral people, but it was at least periodically also inhabited by cereal and tube cultivation-based societies. Thanks to the existence of early food producers along the north and southern routes around the rainforest, foragers practice paracultivation are not needed to explain the diffusion of the crops. So they're saying it ain't the hunter-gatherers that diffuse the crops. It's these people that came into the rainforest that transferred these Asian crops. And this is from a paper called Asian Crop Dispersal in Africa and the Late Holocene Human Adaptation to Tropical Environments. Next slide, please. All right, this is coming here. This is from a pretty recent presentation I did, Genetic History and the Continuity of and Mobility in the Iron Age Central Mediterranean by Hannah and many other scholars. The Iron Age was characterized by a marked increase in mobility in the Mediterranean, advances in sailing and seafaring followed by easier and more frequent travel across the open sea facilitated new networks of interaction for trade, colonization, and conflict. In this paper, we use data from 3 key locations in the central Mediterranean Tunisia, Sardinia, and central Italy to study the genetic origins and mobility of individuals within this region. We see that these technologies changes were accompanied by an increase in gene flow and genetic mobility across the Mediterranean, which impacted the ancestral makeup of populations on its shores. Next slide, please. To the right, you'll see a timeline, which will clearly show you right here in the purple, which is the founding of Carthage to the fall of Carthage. In the early Iron Age, Phoenician and Greek city-states established trading ports and colonies across the Mediterranean. One such colony, Carthage, originally founded by Tyre, became the capital of the Phoenician Punic territories. Carthage was located in the crossroads of many trans-Mediterranean trade routes, and for 500 years it was dominant maritime power of the region until Roman imperial expansion in the final centuries of the BCE. Across the sea, Etruscan city-states flourished in the central and northern Italy across the Iron Age. All right, let's go on here to the next slide. Let's get to the important parts. Okay. While the contemporary scholarships in geopolitics often regards the Mediterranean Sea as a border and silos research along country and continent barriers, these divisions are modern in their making. Carthage and Etruscans were trading partners and at times allies across the Greek and Roman expansion. However, insights into the relationship between these trans-Mediterranean neighbors are limited. Few Punic or Etruscan written sources have survived to present day, and most of these short inscriptions, which goes into something that my opponent was talking about saying just because we can't find things that we have to just consider as speculation. I think that the ancient scholars or the ancient writers who are talking about the history at their time know far more about what was going on in their time period, what type of parchments and things were being used in their time period. And if they say that it was written on a papyri, I'll take them at their word for it over some modern day scholar saying it didn't happen because he can't find it. Because we find like what 1% of the stuff of the ancient world. So I'm not going to make a argument from silence. That's a logical fallacy. I don't think we should make those. Until recently, the genetic makeup of the Iron Age Mediterranean population has been relatively understudied in comparison to earlier cultures. New research has begun to shed light on the Iron Age peoples of Central Italy and Sardinia. To date, however, there has been no whole genome ancient DNA research into Northwest Africa from this or adjacent time periods, despite the major historical importance of Carthage and the complex history of the region. Mitochondrial DNA from an Iron Age individual from Carthage is the only existing ancient DNA from the region. Okay, I'm going to skip the next slide, go to the slide with the map. All right. One thing that I want to point out here with this map, as I always do, is that when you look at the purple here above where it says Phoenician/Punic, and you look over into Western Asia and to where Israel is, you see that they have the exact same genomic composition during this time period. Even when you talk about grains, animals, vegetation, all of it is the same during this time period. Next slide. All right, and in this slide right here, what I want to highlight is at the bottom, as you see going towards the Sahara Desert, you will see that there is a Saharan element here in North Africa. And I believe that this Saharan element is the element that we're talking about, these pastoralists that are sharing this different cultivating technology. When you talk about the Note culture and the Iron Age technology that they brought into West Africa, they were very close to Carthage, not too far from Carthage in these areas. Next slide, please. The Iron Age appears to be a period of formation of a current genetic structure of North Africa. Previous research suggests present-day Central and Western North African populations can be modeled as having four primary ancestral components: a local autochthonous Maghrebi component derived from a Paleolithic hunter-gatherer populations of the region, a Near Eastern component thought to have been introduced with Arab rule of the region in the medieval period, and a sub-Saharan component that has been introduced in the last 5,000 years, and a European component originally thought to have arrived due to historical population movements. While many papers have suggested the Near Eastern and European components resulted from recent historical movements, such as the Arab rule and the medieval North African and the trans-Mediterranean trade in the past 500 years, we see evidence for these components being present in North Africa Iron Age around 2,500 years ago. That puts it like around that 500 BCE period. So when they checked around that 500 BCE period into Carthage, they also find what's very important is the sub-Saharan element. Fregel showed that the European component is, well, that ain't really important. Additionally, we show that both Near Eastern and sub-Saharan African components were present in North Africa earlier than previously thought, reflecting the ongoing interconnectedness of North Africa to these regions for millennia. So North Africa has been connected to sub-Saharan Africa for millennia, according to this report. And this right here makes it very clear to why you see these Asian crops down in sub-Saharan Africa around this 700 BCE period down to about 200 BCE period, because people have been connected and they're migrating south to this arable land where they can grow new crops and get new sustenance. Because back in this time period, we got to remember the population of the planet wasn't very many people on this planet, so it was a lot of land. So if there's a lot of land down there, you're going to go down there and get new advantages for your family and your people group. The sub-Saharan African ancestor we observe in Conquest may result either from direct contact or indirect contact through the nomadic populations of the Sahara. These nomadic groups, known to the Greeks as Numidians, are thought to be ancestral to Amazigh populations living in North Africa. Today, trans-Saharan trade routes made easier by greener and less arid Sahara than today had connected the communities of North Africa with their sub-Saharan African counterparts since the Bronze Age, right? So if it's since the Bronze Age, of course it's going on in the Iron Age. Herodotus noted that the coexistence of sedimentary peoples and nomadic peoples in the land of Lebu in the 5th century BCE. Herodotus is also famous for telling us that Nico II commissioned the Phoenicians to circumnavigate and populate the interiors of Africa due to the overflow due to the Assyrian invasion. This is a part of Herodotus' historical record. In addition to the overland networks, these connections to sub-Saharan Africa also occurred by sea. Herodotus described Phoenician trade routes as extended far beyond the Mediterranean to the British Isles and West Africa via the Atlantic coast, and even that a Phoenician and Egyptian expedition had circumnavigated Africa the previous century. So what, Herodotus lived around 500 BCE or so? So the previous, what's that, 600-700 BCE? The Iron Age may have been a key period for gene flow across the Sahara as well. Next slide, please. All right, and this right here is just another telling from the account of Pliny the Younger, which is also mentioned by Strabo, Ptolemy, and Polybus, about 30,000 men getting in 60 ships around 500 BCE in order to relieve the overflow population of Carthage. They took them to places like the Canary Islands and into West Africa. They even have a whole story about seeing the Cameroon mountains erupt, and also them catching a gorilla, thinking that it's some type of deformed human being, and carrying it back, trying to, shave off his fur and everything, just to find out it's an animal. Next slide, please. Here, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. This is an analysis of the crania of the Delaware using multiple discriminant functions. When we're talking about this area, we're talking about ancient Lachish. This right here is a paper that's done by Soikita. And when I go through this isn't to sit here and argue that this is a matter of fact, but what I want you to do is look at all of the information I've given you, showing you that there's a Saharan element to ancient Israel and the North African region from the the data of peer-reviewed articles. This isn't me running with Derek Lang, who my opponent has been beating the hell out of. All right. I ain't running with him. I'm running with multiple scholars. All right. Next slide. And this is just to get straight to the point. The Lachish remains present one of the best preserved and largest samples of Middle Eastern crania from any time period, with a
2-minute warning.
All right, with a near equal
2-minute warning.
Gotcha. Sexist indeed, with renewed religious restrictions against the excavation and study of human skeletons. The Lachish connections may be the most representative Iron Age osteological series from the southern Levant. All right, in an attempt to avoid difficulties inherited in craniometric analysis, non-discriminate traits were often used for affinity assessment. And just to skip to the point, what is pretty much saying is that half of all the Phoenician cranials carried something called Wormian bones of the lambdoidal suture. Move on to the next slide. All right, in this slide, I just want to read some key parts. The third from the bottom, it says, we learned that the Inca bones are highly frequent in 3 global populations: Southeast Asia, the mummies of the Inca civilization in South America, and Sub-Saharan Africa. Given what we just seen of that Sub-Saharan element being located in both of those regions, it makes it clear that Sub-Saharan Africa is a better place to say that this element comes from. And right here, this is the next slide, please. The Ethiopian genome reveals the extensive Eurasian admixture. This right here just pretty much highlights that the Yoruba and the Pygmies have Eurasian gene flow. The Yoruba have it up to 7 and 6%. Next slide. This right here pretty much shows that R1b V88, which would have been found in Corsica. Now this is found in Cameroon. We don't see very much dispersal between North Africa and South Africa. My best proponent is that the Phoenicians, when they were moving this overflow, they took them by boat, which is why they've been in Cameroon and they haven't really moved since. Next slide pretty much further emphasizes that and goes in and says that there was 2 components of Eurasian migration. The first one 6,000 years ago, and then the second migration was 3,000 years ago in the northern Chadic Basin, which coincides with the Bantu expansion. That was it anyway.
Yo. So we're transitioning to the bottom of the third.
Hold on, I gotta say something real quick. You foul, James. You. Oh my God, man! This brother came with the gene flow. He topped it all nice with the Phoenician argument and establishing certain things. So I want to see Rudi with some all-star defense in the bottom of the third.
That's right, man. Now is the time, man. Your lifespan in the elimination chamber is on the line. Rudi, are you ready?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, it's on you.
All righty. I mentioned that was a lot of source material coming at once, and I don't think I can address all of it, but I can talk a little bit about what I know about. For example, you talked about the Igbo civilization, and it is often Igbos are often, there are Igbo people in Igbo land who regard themselves as descendants of Israelites. There are practicing Jews who are regarded as Jews by the Jewish world as well. But I look at problems with regarding the Igbo religion, the Igbo belief system, Odinani, Omanana. And first, I want to give a little bit of props to Ron Shields, Divine Prospect, because he has developed a working model of acculturation and assimilation, and I'm looking forward to his upcoming research. He's going to present a paper. It takes a while to research this thing, so he's still conducting research. But I'm looking forward to seeing what he comes up with, because he looks at this as well. He's very much on the ball. Kind of shout out to him, much respect. At this time, I can't accept that the Igbo are descendants of Jews or ancient Israelites or Gadites because of differences in the religious system. And for example, let me go ahead and F5. There we go. Let me go down a bit. All right. There are problems in the Igbo religious system. For example, they don't have the stories. For example, what's not there is the patriarchs aren't there. There's no Moses. There's no biblical patriarchs. There's no biblical stories. This is one thing. Now, you could say that they lost all this knowledge and kept the ritual system. This is what many proponents of the Igbo Israelite hypothesis, that this is their conclusion, that, the ritual system was kept. And there were elements that are similar to Judaism and similar to the faith of the Israelites. And those similarities are there, but I would argue that they're general, and there are problems with the Igbo belief system. Now, if it can be proven that there was an assimilation into a pre-existing belief system, then we'd have something. But we don't know, because these are largely oral traditions. We don't know how far the Igbo belief system goes back. And then there's the problem of Christianization, which I'll talk about shortly. And I'm doing this off the fly, so I don't have I can only point out these things. I'd have to go back to the sources where I found them. This is from Derek Afodoranwa at the Medicine Shell channel, for example. Talks about, he is a practitioner, an Igbo American, speaks the Igbo language, parents of Nigerian parentage, speaks Igbo fluently. And I'm not saying that it's possible that not all Igbos, it's very possible that not all Igbos are derivative of, were indigenous. It is possible that there are some that migrants from the outside. But the Igbo belief system as practice, there are a number of things that don't quite jive with the Bible or the faith of the ancient Israelites. For example, the Igbo creation story versus Genesis. I'll highlight that. Shogu, the Igbo deity, the Igbo creator deity, according to we have Genesis, but if you look at the Igbo story of creation, it goes as follows. Shogu was, before the world was created, he had a hut or a room or some sort of structure, and he was working on something. He was working on the creation of the universe, specifically. And he also had a wife. There was another being with him by the name of Allah. Allah's wife wanted to know what he was doing in this hut. She goes to him and says, I want to know what's going on in the hut. He says, I can't tell you. It's far too dangerous. Stay away from the hut. Unfortunately for Allah, she went and looked in the hut, and there was an explosion. You can even interpret this as being the Big Bang. Igbo cosmology is pretty profound as well. I think I found a lot in it that I find pretty deep and philosophically not only just interesting, but there's some truths in it. There's some deep truths in it. But the wah was the sound it made, and then the universe was created. You could call it the Big Bang. Well, Allah, who is Chukwu's wife, was killed in this explosion. And he finds her dead body, and of course he cries, he weeps. His tears fall onto her, and she becomes the earth. She's transformed into the earth. And this is basically the Igbo Genesis story, how the earth was created. And Allah is considered the earth mother. She is the mother of all crops in Igbo cosmology. Or Igbo cosmology, I'm sorry. Igbo cosmology, Allah is the mother of all crops. She is the earth mother. She is the land itself. There are other deities, whereas in the Hebrew Bible, now we can argue for henotheism, but these deities don't have anything to do with deities in the Middle East, the ancient Near East. I've listed a couple of deities here. There's Agbala, which is the priestess of Allah, in addition to leading the community's ritual sacrifices to Allah. She is in charge of executing punishments of individuals who transgress the law. Igbo being, or Odinani being, or Omanana being what is done in the land. Omanala is another name for that. Allah being the earth, the land. Amadioha is similar to the god Shango in the Yoruba religion, god of thunder, of lightning. Agwu is the deity known as Agwusi, is the trickster god, known as all similar to the Akan god Anansi, like the spider and so forth, and the Yoruba god Esu, Ekwensu. And these, of course, the Yoruba and Igbo and many of the Akan system have similarities. And I don't have time to get into that. Ekwensu is kind of an evil figure, kind of is feared as much as Chukwu is respected, much like the devil. There's also Igbo concepts that are not biblical. The concept of chi is something that it's in Igbo cosmology, in the Igbo belief system, nothing stands on its own. Everything has a parallel. Chi is a function of creation. It runs through everybody. Everybody has a chi. It's kind of like an internal spirit. And moi, which has to do with things spiritual. There's also the 4 ages, which is a parallel to Hinduism, the idea that that's kind of a cycle rather than the Hebraic idea or Judeo-Christian idea that time has a linear, it has a beginning and an end. In Igbo cosmology, the 4 ages parallel the 4 yugas in Hinduism. That there's an age of like a golden age, then there's an age of decline, then there's an age of destruction, then there's an age of rebirth. That finds a parallel in Igbo concepts. That is not something that is derivative of the Hebrew Bible. Ikenga, the idea of the power and the force in your right hand. They have the Igbo and the Igala, and also satellite peoples make what's called an Ikenga. It's like a horned statue, and sometimes it's a statue of a man with a machete with holding a beheaded head. It's the Ikenga. It's the power of your right hand, your force, the way you project yourself into the world. This isn't a biblical concept, for example. It's certainly not building an idol. Or to them, it's not an idol. It's basically the manifestation of that. It's strengthening your Ikenga and there are certain rituals associated with that. There's also the 4-day week. So we have to do with market days. There's a separate Igbo calendar that has to do with Odinani, Omanana. So these are big differences. Also, the fact that the vast majority, I bring up the Igbo conference because the vast majority of Igbo scholars and Igbo academics, and we could go back and say, well, this is simply a function of nationalism, independence, and saying that Igbo scholars and academics, and especially the with the Biafra problem, arguing for Igbo autonomy and a distinct Igbo culture and language, that, perhaps that they're going to dismiss any idea of outside influence. But the vast majority of Igbo academics, like Adiel Afigbo, for example, who's probably was the leading scholar of Igbo studies in his time, did not subscribe to the theory of Israelite origin or origin from anywhere else, except for maybe in the vicinity of West Africa. And I don't have time to go into that. I read, there are several books I read. Odinani, the Igbo religion. Probably the foremost personality proponent of the idea that the Igbo are Israelites is Dr. Remy Alona. I've corresponded with him on Facebook. Personally, we get along well enough. I like him personally, but he doesn't like to discuss. Whenever I mention these type of things, and I mention the sources that I've named, he gets a little bit angry with me and says I am simply attracted to the wrong things, and he doesn't address said sources. We still remain on friendly terms, but he doesn't like talking about this. And according to some of his more recent videos, And not to be disrespectful to him at all, but it seems like he is just discovering some of the Igbo academics that don't agree with him for the very first time and starting to talk about them because he doesn't seem to have been wholly familiar with them. Emmanuel Anazoba, for example, he's not a scholar. He's simply a practitioner of Odinani. And I mentioned Adiel Afigbo. I recommend this book very highly. It was also edited by a scholar, the Toyin Falola, which you can see at the bottom, which my opponent mentioned at the beginning of his presentation. The Embattled Gods. I learned a lot from Agbo Yukalu, he was a church historian. I forget which denomination. I think he's Anglican. But he talks about the Christianization of Igbo land. And the main point, the main takeaway that I got from his scholarship was how thoroughly Christian the Igbo people became by the beginning of the 20th century. There were many Igbo within a generation who had completely forgotten the Igbo religion and Igbo tradition. They had become thoroughly Christianized. I highly recommend reading this book and making your own judgment.
2 minute warning. 2 minute warning.
2 minute warning. And the last two things I want to address are Theophilus Elor's Children of the Holy Covenant. He is a Sabbatarian. He's also an academic. I believe he's at Trinity University in Ireland. And the life and ministry of Garrick Sokari Braid. Garrick Sokari Braid was a iconoclastic preacher who, in addition to another votary whose name escapes me now, who was an Igbo Christian, basically set apart, actively destroying Odinani and Omanana shrines, mass baptisms. It was a mass movement, and many of them, the Sabbatarian movement in Igbo land became very popular. A lot of Igbo started practicing not only Pentecostal Christianity, they had broken away from what were the mainstream missionaries the Europeans brought in, and developed an independent. There were independent churches. If you look at Kalu for the beginning of those, he mentions Garrick Braid as well. And it's from these churches that you get Sabbatarianism, people starting to read the Old Testament and starting to practice, much like the rise of these type of movements in the United States and elsewhere, like Seventh-day Adventism, practice Mosaic law and see something in it. And through this prism, you have the development of Messianic groups. This is where I think partly where the affinity for the Israelite hypothesis comes from. Also, the observations of missionaries like G.T. Basden and others. How much time do I have left?
That's time.
Okay, well, I had to come up with this on the fly, but because I was concentrating on Lang, but
yeah, man. Lang is your enemy right now, man. What's going on with you?
Oh yeah, I thought that's what I thought that was James was going to come. Well,
what the hell is going on with you right now, Rudy, man?
James Lang was the foremost because when James talked about Iron Age, like the Iron, Lang was the foremost. He has the most plausible model.
Yeah, but James has the ability to create his own model.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, he basically arguing from genetics and the introduction of crops and anthropology.
Yeah, kicking ass.
Right now. I don't have a ready answer to that because I didn't focus on that. But
all right, Joshua, man, we're entering into the question and answer segment. You want to give an update on the next debate coming up this Friday?
Yes. Friday, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, we will be having our brother Pro Rizzo going against Malachi on whether or not if Paul is a false apostle. So y'all don't want to miss that debate. It's gonna be a slugfest. It's gonna be a bloodbath. Y'all tune in, subscribe to the Source Debate League on YouTube.
Right. All praise and glory, man. So now we're going to enter into the question and answer segment. You want to state the rules? Are they doing 10 minutes, right?
10 minutes each. And since James went first, he will be the first to interrogate his opponent. He has the floor. He has the control. He will be giving you questions. You have to answer them, right? Same thing with you, Rudy. When it's your turn, you get 10 minutes. Then you have the stage, you have the floor, you have the control, and you're able to interrogate James. So we're going to start off with James. Your time starts when you start to speak, James.
All right, man. First, I want to say rest in peace to Derek Lang and Remy Leona, because my man slaughtered them tonight, but he forgot to fight against me. You know?
Yeah.
But my first question would be, during the first round, you said something that really stood out to me. You said that you do believe that Derek Lang has points. Where do you think he has points?
I think he has points where they have to look at. There are some academics that say, well, because the Arab historians use biblical imagery like Ham, and that they immediately say, well, that's the Hamitic hypothesis. African civilization couldn't have, developed on its own. This is an essentially racist idea that it was brought from.
One second, James. Turn on your
Yeah.
camera, bro. 1 second. Turn on your camera.
What's up?
Camera.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah. I'm saying that Lang is correct, because when he's saying that, we can't completely dismiss anything said in these sources. I think the Hamitic hypothesis, the idea that, Yoruba civilization or civilizations in West Africa, when European anthropologists used to do this all the time, they'd say, oh, yeah, well, they had to have come from somewhere more advanced. Or they said the same thing with Egypt. Well, the people in Egypt must have been Aryans. They used to say these type of things. European 19th century anthropologists used to say this. It's a function of academic racism and white supremacy. I think we can agree on that.
Okay, cool. Let me retake my time a little. I got another question for you.
Yep, go ahead.
You said that you do believe that the oral traditions are credible, but at the same time you question them. So can you help me understand, where do you think the oral traditions, where they say, hey, we come from Western Asia or the Levantine area, where they have these oral traditions, do you think they're credible or not?
I think it depends on what you're looking at. Like, for example, if you're looking at civilizations in West Africa that are influenced by Abrahamic religion, specifically Islam, Islam has a profound influence on not only West African peoples, but you'll find this in Central Asia, and where people, you look even I'll use an analogy. Like, for example, you have sources regarding the Khazars, for example, and Judaism. We know there was some sort of conversion there. We don't know how extensive, but the Khazars there were where the Khazars said, well, our people were lost tribes of Israel. We were originally, the royal tribe of the Khazars came, I forget the exact source, but came from the Israelites, or a Jew came and became king of the Khazars and spread the red. So I think when you have Abrahamic religion, which a religion has a profound effect, we're talking about belief system. This goes beyond cultures. People will sometimes, especially the royalty, the rulers will want to link themselves to people coming who are already Muslim or at least monotheists in order to legitimize themselves. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah,
I kind of get where you're coming from. I hear you. I don't think that that's really any form of evidence against, though. Well, my second thing was the Igbo are a very diverse group of people.
Extremely.
That you looked into certain traditions, and you also went as far as to say that the Igbo today are mostly Christianized and don't even know their ancestral traditions. So if the Yoruba today lost their ancestral traditions and are now mostly Christian, why would it be implausible for Israelites to go down to a region that they hadn't been, live there for 2,000 years, and lose their tradition? Because we have to understand Christianity's only been in that region of West Africa, predominantly maybe a few hundred years, if that, maybe 100 or so.
100 years, yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking
Igbo-
about 2,000 years of Israelites
yeah.
being down into West Africa. Why would you expect them to keep a large portion of their culture?
Well, I look at, say that the Igbo are very diverse. That's absolutely true. The Igbo are extremely diverse. Actually, and especially, and even the Yoruba, both groups of the Igbo and the Yoruba don't. It's only recently where you don't have standardization of language, and you don't have. There are also arguments. I've read that in FIBO and other Igbo historians, and also about concerning the Yoruba. The consensus that they were one ethnic group is recent. So that's a very valid point. It is possible that, and plausible, as I mentioned, Divine Prospect, Ron Shields, the idea that a group, and he doesn't maintain that all Igbo are Israelites, for example.
Correct.
He maintains that there was assimilation and a acculturation.
Mm-hmm.
That model. He hasn't really fleshed it out yet. And he's up on the literature and the academic.
So,
but
I would agree with.
It's plausible that there were Israelites, but like for example, the temple at Aguilera and the idea that Eri is, and what's the other biblical figure are founders of. That's going too far back. I think if there was a migration, it would have happened much later.
Well, that was kind of what I was showing in the presentation.
Yeah.
Something that was ongoing. It wasn't just like a one-time thing. But I'll also ask this: looking at the different agricultural sites that I showed that seem to emerge in the homeland of the Bantu expansion, which is Cameroon, they seem to only emerge like we're looking at, some of the earliest, like 800 BCE. A lot of them are more like 500, and a little bit later. Looking at that, and then also taking into account, Hanno the Navigator, circumnavigating.
He did make contact. Yep.
Yeah, circumnavigating West Africa. Him being commissioned to take the overflow from Phoenicia to go and populate the interiors of Africa. How do you look at that, seeing that a lot of new things are emerging in West Africa during the time frame in which they're talking about?
Yeah, I took your points, as like the having to do with the introduction of certain crops, the introduction of like ironwork and things like that. These are things that, naturally these things can be exported, like concepts and crops can be exported.
But one of the sources I gave said that people brought it there, not that it was,
And during the Iron Age.
Yes, during the Iron Age.
They were brought during that. But did they have material culture that these settlers came from? A proof that they.
Well, you
came
can ask
from
me that question
place.
during your time.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess I really just have.
I'm not up on that. That's something I'd have to look at. Look into.
Okay, I just really got one more question for you. With the Note culture emerging around 900 BCE or so, and the emergence of iron smelting in different parts of West Africa coming up around, some as early as 800 BCE, most of them coming more around the 500 BCE time period. And we know that Carthage was just to the north of the Note culture. We know that groups like the Amazigh and the Garamantes traveled back and forth across the Sahara, interacting with populations on both sides of the Sahara. I would ask you, what do you think about the Note culture spreading the iron smelting from interactions with places like Carthage?
It's possible.
And the Western Eurasian DNA that comes in around that time period as well.
I think it's plausible. It's plausible. Would have to be fleshed out with corroborated, but further confirmed, but plausible. I think as far as DNA, I think and I could be wrong here because it's not my bailiwick. I have no expertise in it, but I think when we're talking about people from the Near East and talking about people from Africa and sub-Saharan Africa, when we're talking about e-carriers specifically, we're talking about people who have deep common ancestry going back into prehistory, very deep. So we would have to determine where and when, these people intersect. I think all of our ancestors are those. When we want to talk about people in the Near East, I think, for example, the Natufian culture, and I've said this before on Facebook and things like that, I think these people share deep common ancestry.
Yeah, they do. But I'll just say this last part, and then I'll yield the rest of my time because that was really my last question. I'll say this last thing. Yeah, they do share deep ancestry. That's one of the key points in bringing out like the Amazi related tribes, because they would share a common ancestor with West Africans with EP2. But we also have migration that took place around that Bronze Age, Iron Age period with haplogroups like RV88, which would have been found in places like Corsica. So I think that the best way to explain that again is the circumnavigation due to the
Time. Rudy, it is your turn to interrogate James. You have the floor and you have the control.
All righty. What's your take on, let me put on my glasses so I can see what's going on, what I wrote down. I had to write down some questions. I mentioned the Igbo belief system was different. They're vastly different from a lot of what we have in the Hebrew Bible, for example. Mm-hmm. And if you look at Omanana, Odinani as practiced today by those who practice it, who maintain that it's original, it has its deep cosmology and philosophy. What is your take on these differences, and how do you reconcile them with an Israelite identity for the Igbo?
Okay, I would look at it kind of like what I look at like what the Israelites did in Babylon, right? You have one of the great prophets by the name of Mordecai. He's actually named after the Egyptian god Marduk. Why? Because when the Israelites go into the civilization, what they do is they find a god amongst those people that they see as the same as the Most High, or Yod-Heh-Wahe. And to them, that was Marduk. So the same thing. So if the Igbos go down into Nigeria, they meet all of these autochthonous people that are already there, and they're worshiping someone by the name of Chukwu as their, great god. But, there's a lot of them. Certain tribes worship Ogun, or certain tribes may worship the thunder god. So they would sit there and say, okay, well, this is their Most High God. That's equivalent to our Most High God. So they would likely get involved with some type of rituals or something dealing with that god Chukwu. Also, we know that the main reason, according to their own history, of why they were exiled was because they couldn't keep their own culture. So they have a long history of not even being able to keep their own culture. Mm-hmm.
Good answer. What is, for example, we're going to talk about Christianization and, the biblical narrative, for example. Do you think that they lost the biblical narrative completely? And wouldn't we have record of, because we know we had Christians and in some cases Muslim contact with some of the peoples, and you have those biblical motifs. Mm-hmm. Why would we not have records of people who practiced some form, the Israelite belief or some, say, degraded form of it? Wouldn't they have recognized some of the stories? Mm-hmm. We know that there's similarity in some of the rituals, like circumcision, but circumcision is pretty universal on the African continent and the Near East. It's or at least used to be, to the best of my knowledge. I could be wrong, but wouldn't where would we be able to pinpoint where, when, and how they lost their identity? I mean, for example, you mentioned Marduk. I mean, like, and we know that. I'd even argue that. I mean, I've read L.H. Mills. If you've ever read L.H. Mills about, basically, he says that the Jesuit priest wrote the book in 1912. It's free on PDF. He says that the exiles from Babylon, or at least in Mesopotamia, were influenced by Zoroastrianism to the point where a lot of what became Rabbinic Judaism and Christianity is basically Zoroastrian. So yeah, your point's valid. Absolutely. I think that it's kind of uncomfortable, I think, for Christians and Jews to talk about, because the Zoroastrians aren't considered, nothing in Zoroastrian is considered part of the canon. I don't know if Mills is right. I don't want to get into that because I'm not a scholar of Zend-Avestan literature or anything like that. But yeah, what you're saying is probable. Yeah, but can we pinpoint how where and when, through oral traditions, this might have been lost, and anything like, are there remnants of like Hebraic or Aramaic words, or that?
I would say that the best bet to allude to something like when you said at the beginning of your question, is there any written traditions or anything of that sort? Well, we do have one that I can point to right now off the top of my head, which I did bring in the debate, which had to deal with Eldad the Danite. Eldad the Danite, which was a medieval guy, I think it's around the 9th century, if I remember correctly, was going around, just traveling around Africa, and he comes upon these people in the Sahara, and he says that they have, ancient Hebraic traditions. They have all the books, except, like Lamentations and certain books that would have been gotten after the Assyrian exile. I think that would be the best story that I could point to that shows and talks about Israelites being in that region and having that culture. Yeah.
I mean, those things bear looking into. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think further research is the answer to all of this. It all has to be looked at.
It's real new in Africa.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. I think just not an interrogation, but I think there's some interesting things I've mentioned on the web on the 49ers page on Facebook, things like the Oromo religion, which is monotheistic. That I think there's some argument that monotheism might have been introduced to the Middle East by e-carriers, by the Natufians, or people very much like the Oromo. If we could establish how long or how old things like the Oromo religion, which was Wakifana, which was also practiced by the Somalis, also things like, have you read Gambt's book about the Kamant, for example?
No, I haven't.
Very slim book, written in 1982. Basically, the Kamant religion is largely disappearing. Most of them have converted to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, but they have a very curious religion where they have, Gambst calls them Hebreo-pagans, because they have these different elements in their culture, which are interesting. They don't know how these things got there. They don't know, for example, with the Falasha, I'm familiar with the three different origins of the people called the Falasha, the Ethiopian Jews, but the fact remains there are, in Ethiopian records, there are mention of Jews. They talk about Jews, and they're not talking about heretics. So there were Jews present. The thing is, we know there are also things like mention of Lamlam, for example. There are mention of Jewish polities in Arabic sources, in medieval Arabic sources. The thing is that it's just sometimes the sources are very scant. We don't know what these communities were like, and we don't really know what happened to them. So these are things that look like we can agree upon that it needs further research. Someone needs to be looking at this stuff.
Okay.
I say pick it up, dust it off, look at it. A lot of people, I don't dismiss it out of hand. I simply say, well, we don't have enough to go on, so it needs to be. I think we don't have corroborating evidence. That's the thing.
I think what we can do is, make the best argument we can just based off the evidence that we could accumulate, and that's kind of what I tried to do today. Make the best argument I can based off the accumulated information I have.
Yeah.
And hopefully it comes out with a win for me,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, to Ahaya be praised. Comment. Very interesting. Like the female god, it's like you can even. I'm surprised no one has done this, but maybe somebody has, like the Igbo god, the creation story kind of parallels. If you know anything about Kabbalah and the Shekinah, it's kind of So there is that parallel. It's kind of a vague parallel, but it's like, the idea of a father god, a mother god, the idea that the mother god was separated, killed, and kind of bringing creation together. There is a parallel, but I think you find that in a lot of global religions as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good point. Ahayab we praised made. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
I
think
didn't know that the female god on Elephantine Island. I have to look further into that.
Yeah, I was about to say he makes another good point with that, because we know that the Israelites, again,
They were
in their own
henotheistic. Yeah.
historical tradition, they would
Yeah.
also go and make their the Most High's Assyiran, for
Yeah.
instance. In Canaan, they've done that. When they go to Carthage and stuff, they're calling the Most High Baal, but he got his wife Aneth, so.
Yeah.
It's just something that's very common in the corpus. So for them to fall to something that's like that, to me, just seems like their nature is something
Yeah.
that they've continuously done
Yeah.
for the years that they were there.
I think that's an uncomfortable thing that's uncomfortable for some Christian scholars to address, and Jewish scholars, that, you're dealing with people who might possibly, I've seen arguments for henotheism, that they weren't
I'm a
as
henotheist personally.
Yeah. I think, for example, I forget some of the name of the other scholar, but I think there was, that comes up in debates, what was did monotheism, were the ancient Israelites altogether monotheistic in evolution?
Time. I gave you 15 seconds grace, brother. Time.
All right. Powerful debate. Brothers, you guys did a good job. You guys did a good job. The audience is loving the flow of information. Powerful information, Rudi. Some of the history on the origins of the Igbo religion. Powerful points. Great job, James, on those rebuttals. You guys did a good job, man. It's that time, Joshua.
Yeah, man.
Hey, you ain't got to go home, but you got to get the hell out of here. Somebody got to go.
Right.
Hey, my palm sweated. My palm sweated, Joshua.
Your palm sweat.
I want to reiterate that this is what makes the difference. This is what makes the difference at the source versus rhetoric matches that we see all over social media, right? Judgment by your peers. Me, Joshua, the source, we don't have no dog in this fight, all right? May the best man win. Judges, are you ready? Let me see. I got Kevin G and Lahab and Joshua get Henry's vote. Kevin G, send me your vote.
Yep.
Elder Lahab, send me your vote. Henry,
You want that via text or?
Yes, sir. Text it to me. While we're doing this, family, for those that are watching, and let me say this too. Listen, man, we got a multitude of people watching. We got one like, man. Why y'all doing that to us, man? Come on, family, look out.
Show us some love, baby.
We trying to raise the algorithm because he got an attitude with the source at the moment. Okay? The algorithm has an attitude with the source. So we need you guys' help. We got one like, man. Can we get some love out there? If you guys are enjoying it, as I'm seeing in the comments, we only got one like, family. All right. All right. I'm looking at the. Okay. All right. I got you, Lahab. Kevin G, we just lost him. Joshua, you got yours?
Yeah, he sent his directly to me.
All right, waiting for Kevin G to get back in here. Again, we're gonna come to you guys. Y'all gonna be able to deliberate and explain why you voted the direction that you voted. We just don't want your deliberation to affect another judge because I've literally had this happen in a debate. One judge is speaking, and then the next judge come back and say, "Yeah, well, I was going this way until he said this, and I agree with him." No, we're not doing that. All right, come on back, Kevin G. Come on back. All right, man. So we're gonna go to the first judge, Joshua. There go Kevin G. All right, let's go to Brother Henry.
Okay. Hello, how y'all doing today? Yeah,
Bless.
so I paid attention to key details, and the person who had to prove their argument was the first person, and that was James. And he made some arguments about vegetation. So if people look up vegetation and see the banana, one must understand that the banana is in India. Let's look at Middle Eastern vegetables and fruits. There is none like the dates, the pomegranate. None of these vegetables made it into Western Africa. I heard something that was said about boats that could have been from Carthage and Punic. So they would have horses. So there's no horses or evidence of the Assyrians because the Assyrians had horses and they would have goats. So goats was found in northern Africa around the time Europeans would have came in contact with the Igbo. So I decided to go ahead, Rudi. That's how to pronounce his name. So
Yeah.
yes, I decided Rudi got my vote.
All right. First vote goes to Rudi. Now we have all the judges' decisions. So what I want you guys to do in the comment section, put a 1 for Rudi and a 2 for James Cassel. We want to hear from you all. All right. Put a 1 for Rudi and a 2 for James Cassel in the comment section. All right. This will not affect the votes because the votes are in. All right. So we're going to go to Elder Lahab.
Can you hear me, Jeremiah?
Yes, loud and clear, brother.
Yeah. I just want to say that was very good debate. Lots of sources. Uh, I just think James came out hitting hard in the first round. A lot of good sources. And Rudi surprised me with his first round. Then in the second round, when James showed that it transferred from hunter gatherers to like structured civilizations, I thought that was a powerful point. And I also think that Rudi spent a little bit too much time battling a source that James wasn't really using. So good debate, especially with Rudi saying that was his first debate. Lots of sources, but he did say a lot of times that he agreed with James, or a lot of James' arguments were plausible. So I got to give it to James. Great debate, though, guys.
All right. Look like we got a split decision, folks. We got a split decision. I know them palms getting sweaty now. I see you, Rudi. Usually I see them palms sweaty, man. Right? So this is what it's about, man. This right here will decide your fate. Now, I want to ask James, you there?
Yes, sir.
I'm very surprised, man, you didn't bring out the 4-room homes, man.
Is a different. If I was debating for Exodus, I might have brought out the 4-room home. I
Okay.
don't know if I can substantiate that in West Africa.
Okay. Cool. All right. So Kevin G, are you ready?
Yeah, man. Could you hear me?
Yeah, man. Look, man, it's up to you, man.
Oh, bro, this is crazy. All right, so let me be real honest here, right? So as the debate opened up, I think that James laid a pretty good case using multiple sources to illustrate a view here. Now, I'm not going to put in my own opinion about what I think of the topic, but off the back, we see a lot of things as far as the agriculture of some of the plants and vegetation that came over. Some of the things that we could find here and there in regards to that area. Now, when Rudy did come out, he did come out using Derek Lang, which I'm very familiar with. James knows that I'm familiar with Derek Lang, especially when his paper, when he talks about the oil Yoruba Empire and how they settled in the Hausa states coming from as refugees from the Assyrian war. But again, his focus was on the onomastic evidence, which is really evidence that came from an Arabic source and other sources such as Al Yacobi and some other Arabic sources that kind of give credit to maybe a piece of what that could be. And Rudy was right. You know, a lot of the linguistics that Derek Lang uses is not consistent on how he makes a table as far as describing what those patriarchs are and what they're doing. However, the only thing that I wish for is that if Rudy didn't focus so much on what Derek Lang's dynamic was and not on the totality of different views that could have taken place in that area. For example, there was a round where Rudy was talking about the religion. And when he was talking about the differences as far as the week, how the world was created, the cosmology, a lot of things he said he found interesting, but I think it was real strong evidence to show that the people of the Igbo people did not have the same type of religious system that we could see, maybe elements, but not everything that will encompass what we will say sprung forth from an Abrahamic or ancient Near Eastern standpoint. Now, given all that said, all the information that's been presented, I think James Cassel did an excellent job. I think Rudy did an excellent job in the debate. But my vote, which is going to decide this entire thing right here, is going to go directly to James Cassel for presenting multiple sources and outlook on what could have taken place besides arguing with one scholar in his opinion on it.
All right. All right, folks.
Man.
Well, there you have it, man. I'm trying to get my little horn.
Hey, Rudy, you scared the hell out of me, man. I thought I was going to win the first round, boy.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
Hey, man, look.
Yeah, it was a good build. I enjoyed it. I thought you were going to come with Derek Lang because that's the foremost scholar on the
Mm-hmm.
But you brought multiple sources. A lot of them I didn't have any answer to. So it's I got to hand you the crown.
Well,
yeah,
I
man,
appreciate that, Rudy.
I think the Derek Lane situation, it hurt. I think that James, I think you did an excellent rebuttal on the religious aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Why should these religions carry over identical due to oppression, migration, wars, and integration, right? So I think that idea of the narrative that the religion should hold when there was severe oppression based upon those that practiced that particular religion. If you're going with the understanding of the narrative that, especially during the Roman oppression, as they tried to blackball the Jewish faith, or the faith of the Hebrew Israelites, there were certain things, certain groups of phrase such as crypto Jews, where they practiced Judaism in secret. And so in the process of being a crypto Jew, you're going to lose certain tenets of the religion based upon time and acquisition as you continue to look towards passing something off to your children who have not practiced it fully based upon them trying to be safe in these different communities in which they're operating in. So you're going to lose a lot of things, and the people that wouldn't lose it wasn't facing the same oppression. That makes sense, Rudy?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's an argument for that. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, you guys did a great job. Great job, Rudy, and congratulations, James Cassel. Rudy, would you like closing statement?
Oh yeah, I thought this was a great debate, great build. I think this is what it's all about. This is the type of I think we had the type of debate that could really drive this channel and make it into, like, I think we should do more of this. And I thought it was a great intellectual exercise. James, brilliant opponent, brilliant mind. I knew I was walking into his house, so to speak. I really didn't expect to win, but I'm glad at least I made a kind of a respectable effort. And hats off to James. He came at me with the sources and things that I learned. Most important thing, I think I learned something. So
yeah.
And the forum altogether, I learned a lot from the forum altogether, and it's a very good intellectual exercise. That's why I'm on Genesis 49 as part of the Facebook group, and I'm honored to have been invited.
Yeah, man. Well, we appreciate you showing up, man. We're gonna make sure that you get treated well. I think the audience was very gracious unto you. You had a lot of love in the comments. You impressed a lot of people, man. So I just want to tell you, great job.
Oh, I appreciate that greatly. Absolutely, to everybody. Thank you very much.
I'm going to be reaching out to you through Joshua, because I definitely want to set up a sit down with you on faith.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, James. Congratulations, bro. Closing statements.
Oh man, first I just want to say all praise to the Most High, man. I ain't gonna lie, to that first verdict, my heart started beating. You know?
hey, that's what it's all about, right? That's what we live for, bro.
Hey, suspense is a mug, ain't it?
That's what we live for, brother.
Yeah, but I want to say, man, Rudy, I think you did a great job. If you didn't get bogged down on Derek Lane, kind of responded more to things I was saying. I'm gonna tell you now, this is debate. Even if you didn't really know, how to respond, if you would have gave something that sound good in response, I think you could have probably stole that, because everyone knows I like to take handicap debates where it ain't evidence for me to substantiate it. I just got to formulate a great argument.
Yeah, I had to throw together what I remember from looking at my work on the EBO and all that. It was like I said I got to respond to this because all I have is Lang. All that's what I've been focusing on. So I had to write stuff down real quick and kind of try and formulate an argument. So I maybe if I had prepared for that, maybe I would have fared a little bit better. But yeah, you had some arguments from especially from anthropology that I'd never encountered before. So that and I had to admit
let me say one last
thing. I've never heard of that. Yeah.
Let me say one last thing before I go ahead and close it out. I just want to say, hey, everybody else, y'all better be lucky Rudy went up against me, man. Because I don't think a lot of y'all would get past Rudy, man. Rudy surprised me, scared the hell out of me, man. Hey, great job, Rudy, but
thank you.
I am the argument king, baby.
Hey, James, watch your filthy mouth, man. You got a hard road ahead of you. Don't think for 1 second that it's easy. Hey, King Seth, talk to him, man. Talk to him, man.
Hey, King Seth on the other side of the bracket.
Yeah, man.
Talk to him, King Seth. Talk to him.
Why you think I'm in the building, man? Why you think I'm in the building, man? I'm lurking, man. I stay lurking. Hey, good job, Rudy, man. I'm not gonna lie. Great job, man. You did that. I had you winning. To me, you won. It's a rig. It was rigged. It was set up against you from the first time it came.
All right, family. So listen, man, here at the Source, man, it's very important to us for a non-biased platform. This is why we started the Source. And when we talk with the judges, we make sure that we inform the judges to not come into a debate based upon their own personal stance, right? They have to judge the information that's within front of them, right? So it's important to us. So we want to make sure that everybody understands that you're going to get a fair shot here, right? Even though people may be rooting against you, has nothing to do with the platform itself. All right.
Hey, let me say one quick thing, Jeremiah. I do want to say that, to judge number one, I apologize because I did not mention the horses, but the note culture was a horse riding culture, and just so you know. And I did bring them up.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Joshua.
Man, look, man, Rudy, my dog, bro, and it hurt me when I saw the bracket. I was like, "Oh no, he killing my kid." But I always had faith in Rudy. I knew Rudy wasn't scared. Like I said, never bone crushed the time, and he came for a fight. He came for a fight. Give my brother some more debates and some more time in the ring, man. Rudy, this is not gonna be your last time we see you.
No,
right?
I'll be honored to come back.
Rudy, stick around, man.
Yeah, man. Let's get it.
Yeah, man. We're gonna throw you in there with Kevin G so you can lay the smack down on his candy ass. All right, that's what we're gonna do next. All right, Kevin G, you over for thou. All right.
Oh man.
All right, man. So again, family, we appreciate it, man. When it comes to this tournament, the Elimination Chamber, it's a real thing, man. I got a lot of messages earlier on social media about brothers and sisters rooting us on. So we're going to continue on in this tournament, man. Listen, help us, man. Please like, share, and comment, right? Get the word out, right? Because more powerful discussions, more powerful debates on the way here at the Source Debate League, where champions are made. Source Gang, man.
Yeah.
Precept Duke.
Little motherfucker gonna try to rob me. Well, I'm gonna show you how we do it up here in Vegas. No, I wasn't trying to rob. Shut up! Before I bust a cap up in you. Now who sent you? No.
Source up, we standing tall in your short stuff.
Yes.
Our lunch is the bullshit that you dressed up. Address us on scholarship, homie, knowing you messed up. So fessed up, you look for the best, knowing that that's us. Source up, we standing tall in your short stuff.
Yes.
Our lunch is the bullshit that you dressed up. Address us on scholarship, homie, knowing you messed up. So fessed up, you look for the best, knowing that that's us. Sword clown, know that it's over like it's the fourth down. We the source now. Hear a big bang with tanks on ground. More than the scrimmage, yeah, we forcing the sinning, yeah, we pushing no limit. Leave the fight with no blemish. You the hometown, but you not receiving no privilege. We gon' do you bad, rape, rob, and pillage. But we nothing like the white man. I can see that you a big fan. Every time we go live, I see you in the damn stands. Watching and plotting, I see that you stalking a bit.
Yes.
You laughing at your people, they seeing you taking
Here's
a
the
bit.
definition of